Welcome to the video tutorial on how to add a NETGEAR router to your network. Let's start with the first way, the easiest way. I use a laptop that connects to any LAN port of the NETGEAR router using an Ethernet cable. Of course, there is no internet connection. Here's how to configure router mode. You can set up a static IP address for the NETGEAR router if you want. In this case, I configured the NETGEAR router to import the IP address from the DHCP server in my local network. This is the router's default configuration. Next, I set up the wireless network for the NETGEAR router. After completing the wireless network setup, I connected the NETGEAR router to my network via the WAN port. I use an Ethernet cable connected to the router via the WAN port. This method is the simplest but has certain limitations. That is, the devices connected to it are allocated a new IP address range that is different from your internal network. Therefore, devices connected to it cannot access internal resources such as shared printers, NAS servers, file servers. To fix that, I show you the second way. Like last time, use an Ethernet cable to connect between the computer and the NETGEAR router. In this method, you set up the wireless network first. Because after completing the setup in access point mode, it is difficult to access the NETGEAR router. After completing the setup, go to Advanced Settings. Here you set up the router in access point mode. In this mode, NETGEAR becomes transparent within your network. This is the Ethernet cable connection diagram when configuring access point mode. And here are the wireless network settings I just configured in the previous step. Devices connected to it wired or wireless share the same IP address range with other devices. Devices connected to it using cable or wireless are allocated IP addresses from a DHCP server on your local network. This method is suitable if you want to expand your network but still want to access internal resources. And finally, the third method. Here's how to add a NETGEAR router to your network without cables. These are two wireless routers. I will configure repeater mode to connect them together. This method is suitable when you want to expand the network but cannot deploy a cable between two routers. First, I connected the main router to the computer using an Ethernet cable. On the main router, I get information such as MAC address, channel, IP address. The NETGEAR router connects to the router using the MAC address. You can connect two NETGEAR routers this way if you want. On the main router, I set up the wireless network as above. Make sure the channel settings are static and the same between the two routers. In this case, I set channel 1 for both routers. Next, you set up wireless network security on the main router. I recommend that you set the same security settings on both routers. Now you switch to connecting your computer to the NETGEAR router. On the NETGEAR router, set up repeater mode as follows. You connect your computer to one of NETGEAR's 4 LAN ports. First, you set up a wireless network for the NETGEAR router. As mentioned, you set up a fixed channel for the wireless network. Because on the main router I set up channel 1, so on the NETGEAR router I set up channel 1. I set up the same security mode as on the main router. Then I wrote down the wireless password for the main router to connect to the NETGEAR router. I will guide you on how to do it in the next step. Because the NETGEAR router has two bands, I set up two different wireless networks. Once completed, you can connect to one of the two wireless networks above. During the configuration process, I recommend that you write down the above information. After completing the wireless network setup, go to Advanced Settings. Here you set up the NETGEAR router in repeater mode. Set the parameters as follows. You enable repeater mode on NETGEAR. You set the IP address to the same range as the main router but a different IP address from the main router. This is the static IP address I assigned to the NETGEAR router. It is different from the main router. Next, I set up the main router's MAC address. The NETGEAR router connects to the main router using a MAC address. Once completed, you will lose connection to NETGEAR. Now connect your computer to the main router and set up repeater mode as follows. I use the parameters set on the NETGEAR router to configure on the main router. On the main router, I discover the surrounding access points. Make sure the distance between the two routers is close enough that they can detect each other, then the connection will be stable. This is the wireless network name and MAC address of the NETGEAR router. I added it to repeater mode on the main router. On the main router, I enabled repeater mode and added the NETGEAR router in the list of MAC address users. Two routers connect to each other using MAC addresses. I used the wireless password that was set up on NETGEAR to connect the main router to it. Above are the steps to connect the NETGEAR router to your network without a cable. Above are 3 ways to add a NETGEAR router to your network. Depending on your needs, there is a suitable connection method. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good luck.